Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful. Let me start with sterling, which has been extremely volatile, of course. Last trading at 127.94, got above 128.50, which is a stupendous rally from below 120. Lots of optimism. Some of that optimism was spiked by the DUP this morning, but we'll watch and see what develops from here. But I think practically all of it's in the price now, and in fact I think it's going to be difficult for it to rally much further from here besides the spike risk. So currently 127.94, and let's keep an eye on that. Home thoughts, lovely photograph, sunset in the Mara with a wildebeest positioned near an acacia tree as a flock of birds fly by. Sublime sunset taken by Ryan Yank in aid of the Sheldrick Trust. In this photograph, a magnificent tusker checks us out as he crosses the Mara River under an amazing brooding sky. Bold move taken by Lance van der Veer in aid of the Sheldrick Trust, and that's a beautiful photograph as well. I went into a Mark Twain wormhole and he said so many things. Keep away from people who try to belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that. But the really great make you feel that you too can become great. I do not fear death. I have been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. The worst loneliness is to not be comfortable with yourself. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. Reality can be beaten with enough imagination. Finally, a leopard cub hiding in the trees, home alone, taken by Lydia Cornu in aid of the Mara Trust. Lovely photograph as well. There seems to have been quite a fracas between Trump and Nancy Pelosi. Trump tweeted, "Nervous Nancy's unhinged meltdown." And it's a matter of perception who had the meltdown, apparently. Speaker Pelosi rather cleverly took the photograph that Trump tweeted out and has now put it as a banner on Twitter. And I do think she is a babe in apostrophes, and please don't take that as being misogynistic in any shape or form. I am impressed. The economic weapon is a much, much more effective one than the military one. We are no longer in 1936. Trump got it. This is Nassim Taleb referencing the letter that Trump sent to Erdogan. I've spoken and written about this in August 2018, when the last time Trump was imposing financial warfare strategies on Erdogan because he was trying to get Pastor Brunson released. And I said then Trump seems to be relishing his financial warfare strategies. Rencap tweeted Venezuela guy saying GDP is down from $350 billion in 2012 to an estimated $60 billion in 2019. And I said again last year, this was in an interview with Sputnik, the dollar is a weapon and Trump is relishing his financial warfare strategies. His aggressive foreign economic policy is the signature success of this administration. It is highly effective. Trump can keep it up. It's working a treat. Now let's move to Putin. He seized on Trump's Syria retreat to cement his Middle East role. Good morning from Manbij, a private contractor. Oleg Blokin said in a video posted on Twitter. Yesterday it was them here, and today it is us, which sums it all up. The change of occupancy underlines how Russia has become the dominant foreign power in Syria, using the country's more than 8-year war to project its influence in the Middle East by seizing on US reticence and leveraging a network of alliances. Of course, this Turkish invasion has been bearing down on these cities in the north. Kurdish militants were forced to strike an alliance with the Russian-backed Syrian army, paving the way for Damascus to reassert control over this large territory. The deal was unthinkable a few days before and bears the hallmarks of Mr. Putin's gambit in the Middle East since a high-risk military intervention in 2015 swung the Syrian war in favor of President Assad, rebuilt Russia's regional influence through flexible friendships and ruthless pragmatism that often embraces bitter foes, says the Financial Times. Russia really tells others what to do. It understands what each of them wants the most and what each might afford to do without, and then seeks mutual accommodation on that basis. Putin on Tuesday was talking with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed al-Nahyan, and of course his special envoy for Syria, Alexander Lavrentiev, said that Moscow was simultaneously brokering negotiations between Damascus and Ankara to head off a military clash. Russia and the UAE are getting close on all fronts, including Syria. Russia's challenge now is to help work out an arrangement among 3 players, Turkey, the Kurds and Syria, hard but not impossible. It looks like Russia's military deployment and diplomatic involvement in the Middle East will become permanent. This Russian insertion started in October 2015. I actually wrote about it then when I called Putin a geopolitical grandmaster. He arrived at Unga and he asked, I cannot help asking those who have caused the situation, do you realize now what you've done? And then within 24 hours of delivering that speech, Russia instructed that the US should vacate Syrian airspace. This message was not delivered to Ashton Carter by his Russian counterpart Shoigu. It was delivered to the US Embassy in Baghdad, and pretty soon after that message was delivered, Russia began its intervention on the side of President Assad of Syria. I said then Putin fancies himself the flycatcher and Syria the fly trap, and the speed of execution confirms, and I was talking about 2015, but in the scheme of things we're 4 years down the road, the speed of execution confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor that will have to be considered. It is a breathtaking rebound, I said. And we have to give credit where credit is due. It's really quite remarkable. A lot of people say that when you look at the Russian economy, it's the size of Italy, but then the return on geopolitical investment is just off the charts. President Xi said a few days ago, we'll grind you up and crush your bones. And here we see a photograph of Jimmy Sham, who was bleeding heavily from his head and arms. This is from D. Mosister. As I said previously, the folks in Hong Kong, whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them, are in open rebellion. This is a stunning Orwellian visual of Carrie Lam giving her policy address to the Legislative Council by giant video screen because she was interrupted twice by demands for democracy. So that too is a very volatile situation. The Chinese are obviously not going to back down. They're showing an iron fist, but you've got the people of Hong Kong simply not standing down either. So it remains a situation which could tip in either direction. His march on horseback in Mount Paktu is a great event of weighty importance in the history of the Korean Revolution, KCNA said. Having witnessed the great moments of his thinking atop Mount Paktu, all the officials accompanying him were convinced with overflowing emotion and joy that there will be a great operation to strike the world with wonder again and make a step forward in the Korean Revolution. It's unclear what the operation might involve, but Kim has often made trips to the sacred mountain at times of major policy endeavors. His father and his grandfather also did the same. Analysts say the symbolism underscores North Korea standing up to international sanctions and pressure over its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. This is a statement symbolic of defiance, said Joshua Pollock. The pursuit of sanctions relief is over. Nothing is made explicit here, but it starts to set new expectations about the coming course of policy for 2020. Last year, Kim took the South Korean President Moon Jae-in to the top of the mountain as part of a historic summit as well. And what I was talking about, I've written about it severally in February 2018 when you had those events in Pyeongchang. I said what we saw unfold in Pyeongchang. Do you remember those his bodyguards running alongside the limousine? I said that marks a significant and iconic moment for the Mount Paktu bloodline. 30th of April 2018, a new history starts now, an age of peace from the starting point of history. The events that took place that Friday at the truce village of Panmunjom and during the Inter-Korean Summit, I said, were breathtaking for the Hollywood optics, and similarly, this riding this white charger as Hollywood optics of the First Order. Then the opening shot of Kim Jong-un surrounded by a phalanx of North Korean officials, later replayed as Chairman Kim sat in his presidential vehicle, surrounded by his ninja bodyguards, was almost as good as the opening sequence in P.T. Anderson's Boogie Nights. This was cinema of the highest level, which is no surprise when you consider that Kim Jong-il, the father, was obsessed with cinema and amassed arguably the world's largest personal film collection, over 20,000 bootleg 35mm screening copies. Kim Jong-il also had a penchant for Hennessy parody cognac, and for 2 years in the mid-1990s, he was the world's largest buyer of Hennessy parody cognac, importing up to $800,000 of the stuff a year. Kim Jong-il began his career as the head of the state's propaganda and agitation department, and it's clear that Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, who holds the same role and evidently handles all the optics, is a chip off the old block. And that's the point. It's her who's putting all of this together. And then many years ago, in November 2010, I wrote, "Far away in distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom." And they've all had tiny little hands like the elves in The Elves and the Shoemaker. International markets, JP Morgan veteran refuses to buy insane negative yield bonds. The whole concept of negative yields, of people paying for the privilege of lending money, is insane behavior to me, he said. I do not pay to lend money. That's not fixed income investing, that's fixed loss investing. He gave 3 reasons. Bonds are already pricing in bad times. You can only make a capital gain from negative yielding debt if someone crazier than you is willing to come in to pay more for the privilege of lending money to an over-levered government or a company. What I'm saying is that you print this much money, you put trillions of dollars of securities on your balance sheet, at some point something's going to break. I'm not saying it's going to be in the short term, but man, when this thing breaks, the losses fixed income investors will be facing will be devastating. And it's my job in that environment to post positive returns. He's trailing behind his peers, obviously, because we've had this huge rally. And I really wrote about this in an article which was called The Wizard of Oz World when I was speaking to this. I said The Wizard of Oz is a film made in 1939, widely considered to be one of the greatest films in cinema history. It is a version of L. Frank Baum's 1900 children's book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and featured the then child star Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale. The wizard is one of the characters unseen for most of the novel. He is the ruler of the land of Oz and highly venerated by his subjects. Believing he is the only man capable of solving their problems, Dorothy and her friends travel to the Emerald City, the capital of Oz, to meet him. Oz is very reluctant to meet them, but eventually each is granted an audience. One by one, the wizard appears in a different form, once as a giant head, a beautiful fairy, a ball of fire, and as a horrible monster. When at last he grants an audience to all of them at once, he seems to be a disembodied voice. Eventually, it is revealed that Oz is actually none of these things, but rather an ordinary conman from Omaha, Nebraska, who has been using elaborate magic tricks and props to make himself seem great and powerful. And this is the point about the bond market. Currency markets, let's have a look at that. Euro dollar 110.76. We've drifted higher, but I think it's a drift rather than a reversal. Dollar index 98.067. Japanese yen 108.84. Swiss franc 0.9936. The pound 127.83. Below the key level of 128, the Australian dollar 0.6789, Indian rupee 71.2175, South Korean won 11.8504, the Rial 4.15, Egyptian pound 16.23, and the Rand 14.8850. This is an important level in the Bloomberg Dollar Index. I agree with Bear Trap's report, but I think we're still within a solid uptrend and we're going to continue higher. Euro dollar 110.78, I'm expecting it to start to peter out. Why the renminbi's challenge to the dollar has faded is an article in the Financial Times. The dollar is still used on one side of 88% of all foreign exchange trades, according to the Bank for International Settlements. The renminbi shares just 4%. The currency amounts for about 2% of total foreign exchange reserves, according to the IMF. Mr. Kroeber contrasted this move to the US decision in the 1960s not to throttle the nascent euro-dollar market when an offshore pool of dollar liquidity began ballooning in Europe. China's decision stabilized the renminbi, he said, but it left it bereft of credibility as an international financial currency. Who's going to issue or buy bonds in a market where liquidity can be turned off at the drop of a hat? And this is the problem. That's why I said on the 7th of October, shorting the renminbi is a bit of a no-brainer trade. We're currently at we're rallying, 708.80. And as I previously said, the most important currency to watch right now is the renminbi, in point of fact, in part because of this proxy effect, China, Asia, emerging markets, frontier market currency feedback loop phenomenon. Netflix reported results. International markets account for almost all of Netflix's growth, most of its total customers. The world's largest paid online TV network signed up 6.26 million new users outside the US, beating all forecasts. Expects to sign 7 million more international customers during the next 3 months. Benefited from a couple of its most popular shows. Teen science fiction show Stranger Things was viewed by 64 million households in the first 4 weeks, making it the most watched season of original programming on Netflix. A new season of La Casa de Papel, a Spanish heist series, was viewed by 44 million households. It was Netflix's most watched show in non-speaking English countries. Netflix, as I said, 6.8 million paid subscribers were added, considerably more than expectations. Has more than 160 million global subscribers. CEO, in our view, the likely outcome from the launch of these new services will be to accelerate the shift from linear TV to on-demand consumption of entertainment. Just like the evolution from broadcast TV to cable, these once-in-a-generation changes are very large and open up big new opportunities for many players. Over the next 10 years, many streaming services will grow viewing as streaming replaces linear TV. 23rd of September, I wrote, I'm putting out a conviction buy on Netflix at Friday's closing price of $270.75. We've subsequently rallied in after hours trading. We were last at 314.5. I think we're going back to fresh all-time highs. I wrote in that article on the 23rd of September, which I call Streaming Dreams, Non-Linearity, Crude Oil and Netflix. My mind kept reverting to an article I'd read in 2012, Annals of Technology, Streaming Dreams by John Seabrook. This world of online video is the future. There aren't any rules, there's just the artist, the content and the audience. People went from broad to narrow, and we think they will continue to go that way, spend more and more time in the niches, because now the distribution landscape allows for more narrowness. And this brought me to Netflix. Onslaught of competition in the market it had invented. Apple, of course, Warner Media, NBC Universal, Disney, and it corrected brutally, massive price correction. But I said the majority of analysts are in the US, and in my opinion, these same analysts have an international blind spot. Once investors appreciate that the story is an international one and not a US one anymore, we will see the price ramp to fresh all-time highs. I therefore am putting out a conviction buy on Netflix at Friday's closing price of 270.75, and I'm pleased to see that we've had a good recovery, and I expect that recovery to gain a lot of momentum and for us to trade about $400 before the end of the year. Commodity markets, gold 1489 last. It's finding it very difficult to poke its nose above 1500, and therefore I think we're going to come back. Crude oil $53.05. I'm bullish about oil, and I think in part because of the Aramco IPO that they'll look to massage the price higher. Sub-Saharan Africa, pensioners sleep outside Zimbabwe banks as savings vanish again. If there is cash available, he will collect the equivalent of just $26, down from $400 he was getting a few months back. A decade ago, when he went to collect the lump sum he was also entitled to after 25 years in the army, he was given just $1. The rest had been eaten away by hyperinflation, he was told. Pensioners have little choice. In total, about a quarter of the population of 16 million is left. This June, the authorities suddenly banned the use of foreign currencies, reintroduced the Zimbabwe dollar, which has since plunged 59% against the US dollar. Currency changes and an inflation rate that was estimated at 300% by the IMF in August aren't the only threats to pension value. When the doors open, Elizabeth Msengwa, the branch manager, breaks the news that cash is in short supply. Only the first 500 in the line will be handed numbered cards by the bank security guards and given Zimbabwe $80, the equivalent of just over $5 US, mostly in coins. In this photograph, you see pensioners queuing to withdraw their pensions outside a branch of the Central African Building Society in Harare. As I wrote in January, quoting Yuval Noah, money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. I was saying then that there's a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions. And I said then the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. And that the choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. If the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. In January, I was saying what is clear is that Zimbabwe is at a tipping point moment. The government has been deploying voodoo economics for a long, long time, spending money it doesn't have. Zimbabwe's bread price jumped 60%. Bread now costs 97 US cents a loaf. And that's why I said there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions, and particularly bread prices, in fact. We just had load shedding at Eskom headquarters at Megawatt Park during a meeting. I'm not making this up, Kwasi Kasondia. Charlie Robertson has pronounced that South Africa is heading for a junk downgrade. That was in my recent article. A meme flying around on social media is that there is a new sex position called the Ramaphosa. Get on top and do nothing. Uganda plans to withdraw more financing from its petroleum fund than it did in the past 2 fiscal years combined, central bank data show, even as the East African country is yet to pump a drop of oil markets. Uganda plans to withdraw more financing from its petroleum fund. Finance Ministry is expected to draw down $120.6 million in the fiscal year to end June. It is yet to begin commercial oil production, has already taken out 325.3 billion shillings. Yoweri Museveni, the president, was a guest of mine at Mindspeak. That link is up on the website. South Africa, all share up 6.36% so far this year. Dollar rand 14.87. Egyptian pound 16.2278. EGX30 up 9% year to date. Nigerian all share down 15.78% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 13.29% year to date. President Uhuru Kenyatta has declined to approve the finance bill and instead asked MPs to scrap commercial lending rate caps. Parliament could agree with the President and amend the bill to remove the rate caps, or could decide to push the bill through, which would require 2/3 support in the House. Let's see what happens here. The stock market, banking stocks are on the move. The economy is being choked by interest rate caps, Patrick Njoroge. So let's see what the parliamentarians do, because at the end of the day, the needle has to be threaded in Parliament. James Macharia, the SGR is the most profitable, viable project in sub-Saharan Africa, he told the Standard. There are 2 competing views of the new Chinese-built Naivasha standard gauge railway in Kenya. This is the one from Xinhua, and the other one is from the Standard. I take you back to my article, which was quoting Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I was referencing Xi Jinping at FOCAC last year when he spoke about the end of vanity. Kenya is to double its debt ceiling to almost match the economy's size. The move effectively removes any restrictions on debt accumulation for the foreseeable future due to the magnitude of the ceiling, said Jack Nell. IMF recommends the present value of emerging market nations' debt shouldn't exceed 74% of GDP. Kenya set a lower cap of 50% and has breached it. The IMF estimates the ratio for Kenya at 59.9% for this year. Kenya is already exceeding the recommended limits for debt servicing costs. The IMF's recommended threshold is 30% of revenue. The country's reading for 2017 was 42.7%. The economy is not generating enough revenues to cover the debt servicing requirements, the PBO said. The Nairobi All Share will be much firmer today, but it's up 4.03% year to date. The NSE 20 is down 14.05% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.